Well, hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with my good friend and fellow warrior for justice, Alfonso Rachel, and this is the Virtue Signal made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. And we're running our way through the 7 cardinal virtues, the classical virtues that have been identified throughout history by philosophers as being the antidotes to the vices that can ruin our lives and ruin our society as well. And we are now getting down to one that I think is extremely prevalent in our society, and that is the cardinal sin of envy, which classically has been opposed by the cardinal virtue of gratitude. So as society gets richer and richer and more luxurious, and it's no longer a question of like, well, I've got a dirt floor and the other guy has a dirt floor, but he also has a goat and I don't. There's a lot more to be envious about these days. And it seems like every day that goes by, there are more and more material things that generate this idea of envy. And we're finding now an entire political philosophy that's based on envy. Marxism is fundamentally driven by envy. They say it's about justice, but what it really is about envy. And it seems like with so many of these other vices that we talked about on this show, seems like we are in a period of extreme envy pandemic out there right now.
Sure, man. And how does that adage go, Bill? You probably know this better than I do, but it's envy is like the person who passes by a nice house and says, you know, I want a house like that someday. I'm going to get a house like that someday. And the real ugliness of envy is like, I'm going to get the guy who owns that house. You know, I probably butchered that whole day. I haven't heard that saying in a while, but it makes sense.
I think it was a story of I think it was when a Soviet diplomat was visiting America, and whether it's true or not, but the story goes something like this: the Russian and the American are driving through this American neighborhood, and they see these incredible houses, and the Soviet guy thinks nobody should live like that, and the American guy says everybody should live like that, and that's really it, right? The difference between an envious person and a non-envious person is an envious person sees somebody driving by in a $100,000 car and say he should never have a car that expensive. And a non-envious person says, man, if I work hard, I could have a car like that.
Sure.
That's really it, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's envy. Now, envy itself, envy isn't exactly evil, right? It's another one of those things that's not exactly evil, because even God himself uses envy. I mean, he said that about the Israelites. It's like, I'm going to turn to the Gentiles and I will pour out my blessings on them, and you're going to see the joy in them. And it's supposed to make the Israelites envious. So envious itself can actually save somebody's life. Envy can also be, it can be a motivator. However, unchecked envy, where you're willing to do nefarious things, to basically pour out your wrath on somebody for having something that you don't, that's when it can turn ugly. But it's once again one of those things that you have to square by the Lord in terms of a healthy and a nominal degree of this envy, where it's not even really envy. It's more of inspiring. You're inspired by maybe what somebody has, or you have these aspirations that you can use for not just to be as a blessing to yourself, but be a blessing to others. So even in that sense, envy kind of teeters on whether it's really evil or not.
Well, let's go to an older word, a more biblical word that maybe eliminates some of that confusion. Why don't we talk about covetousness?
Exactly.
Go, man.
That's, I mean, because now here's the thing. And once again, I may step on some toes, may ruffle some feathers here. That's why my foundation for when I look at these virtues and they look at these sins, I don't necessarily go to the traditions of the 7 deadly sins. I go right to the 10 Commandments itself. That gets right down to the nitty gritty of the whole thing. So the 10 Commandments is going to tell you, thou shalt not covet. Covetousness itself is a problem. So, and it will lead to things like theft. It will lead to things like slander. It will lead to things, of course, like murder. These are the things that follow. Basically, when you break down all the 10 Commandments, that's what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with murder concerning all of them. So, but yeah, you're right, Bill. It's like, let's get down to the nitty gritty of it. Covetous and greed, envy, of course, will be a byproduct of that.
Yeah, covetousness is, you could say, well, I envy that guy's got nice stuff, but covetousness, which is really the essence of what we're talking about here, to covet something is not just to say he's got nice stuff. To covet something is to say he's got nice stuff and I want it for me. I'm going to take it from him.
That's the one. And
that's a whole different animal.
That's a whole different animal. And unfortunately, not only do we have it's one thing to have a culture like that. It's one thing to have a neighbor like that. The problem is that we want an institution of that. We want the state to be able to facilitate these things. And see, this is where it comes down to the bigger problem, Bill. When we look at the 10 Commandments, one of those commandments is you shall not have any other gods before you. And the full breakdown of that is you shall not let anyone make you bow down before them. And when we talk about gods, Bill, when God is breaking down this commandment, he's not just talking about gods in a deistic sense. He's talking about positions of authority, institutions of authority. So basically, what we're being made to do, Bill, is that we're being made to bow down to the gods, the state, the institutions of authority that have made it to where they can institutionalize covetousness. They can institutionalize theft under the guise of good intentions and consider themselves virtuous because we're being made to be our brother's keeper. And so people can sit back and they can envy and assume that out of their envy, the state is going to take care of that for them and give them what they feel entitled to.
That's exactly right. They take the sin of covetousness, they use the state as the lever so they don't have to get their hands dirty going and actually taking it for themselves.
Yes.
And then they get the luxury of virtue signaling by saying, no, all of this envy and covetousness I'm doing for the poor.
Yes.
And by the way, where's my check? P.J. O'Rourke was the guy who actually turned me into a conservative because he was just so funny and so kind of cool. Back in the 80s, I started reading him, and he really had a profound effect on me. And he was talking about envy and envy in terms of socialism and communism and all the rest. And he comes to the 10th commandment, and he basically says that in the 10th commandment, it says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife or thy neighbor's house or thy neighbor's ass or whatever the case may be. And P.J. O'Rourke says, in other words, go out and get your own.
Exactly.
That's harder, isn't it? It's harder to go and work for something. It's harder to work for a nice house than it is to want to take a nice house away. One of the biggest applause lines I ever got in a speech was just kind of flew through my head, and I said, it's much easier to tax a business than it is to run a business. And that's really what it comes down to, isn't it? Right? I mean, you just make a decree, you have the force of law, I want that, and I'm going to take it.
Yes. And now, the thing is, and that's where people, they want to lean on Jesus and they want to lean on his disciples and stuff like that to facilitate their envy and what they feel entitled to. It's not fair that somebody else has this, and they'll say, well, Jesus was all about socialism and everybody being this community, and they have this communal living and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, sure, that's what Jesus wanted, but he wanted people to do it by their own volition, though. He didn't say for the state to do it. And they'll say things like, well, didn't they have their believers come and bring all their possessions to the feet of the emissaries? And I'm like, yeah, they did by their own volition. And they didn't bring their possessions, mind you, their possessions, because Jesus recognizes your property. Take your possessions and you can bring them to the emissaries, not bring them to the state, bring them to the emissaries. That's a totally different thing. So, in that, there's this communal living that they have where they don't have this infection of the Joneses and stuff like that. And they're not trying to...
the infection of the Joneses, man, that's right on the nose.
Right? That's not what they're going, because they know that their fulfillment is not in that. But regardless of which, even if people want to use that as a model for how we're supposed to be, they're still leaving out this key aspect. Jesus didn't tell us to make it a state institution.
Yeah, for those of you younger viewers out there, that term's not in common use anymore. But when I was growing up, in the 60s and 70s, there was an expression which is you have to keep up with the Joneses, meaning if the people next door, the Jones family, had a new car, then you had to get a new car. You had to keep up with the Joneses, and and it was a form of envy and covetousness, and led to a materialism in the worst kind of sense. Now, as it turns out, Zoe, one of the things I'm just happiest with in my entire career is I was trying to understand the power of envy as opposed to gratitude, which is the virtue that basically mitigates envy. And I came up with an analogy I like very much. So let me just run this past you real quick, and the people at home may want to watch or listen as well. I was trying to get to the idea of some people would rather see other people fail rather than watch everybody else rise. There's a famous story, an old Russian proverb about a guy who gets up and prays every day, goes out there every morning, prays to God, and prays just for a cow. And then finally, after a year of prayer, this blinding light appears and he has a cow, and the cow means he gets milk. He can make cheese and sell milk, and he can use the cow to plow the fields. And his neighbor across the dirt road is just furious about this and sees this guy with the cow. And so he prays to God every single day. And then there's a blinding flash of light after a year, and God says, "What do you want?" And the guy says, "I want you to kill that guy's cow." That's the essence of it, isn't it? That's not the example I was talking about, but that's what envy is. It's not like, give me a cow so I can do better for myself. That guy's got something, and if I can't have it, I want it destroyed.
Yes. And now that is a picture, Bill, of like when it comes to America. And, America's got this thing that we're supposed to be very grateful for, but at the same time, it's something very valuable that people want destroyed. We have liberty here, and liberty is valuable, and people tend to either want to steal or destroy things of value.
It's priceless, yeah.
Right? So it's kind of like the natural inclination of things. And unless you have this standard to square that on, to know what it is that you're protecting, these things are going to be, they're always going to be under a constant threat. So I guess you could say that liberty itself is that cow, and somebody feels like, hey, I want to kill your cow.
Because it's too hard to work for my own. Anyway, let me come back to this example, because I was so happy with this, because I could feel it myself. It was something that I could feel the emotions just changing me instantly. So here's this example I had for the power of envy. Let's say that you work in an insurance company and you're just one guy in 100 cubicles on the 27th floor of this insurance agency. You've been there for 20 years. And you're wrapping up your work one day at 5 o'clock on a Friday. And all of a sudden, the president of the company and the chief financial officer appear at your cubicle and say, "Hey, I want to just talk to you for a second." You think, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And the president says to you, he says, "Listen, I know you probably don't know this, but we've been watching your performance for the last 20 years. You've been exemplary. You've come in extra hours. You've stayed late. You've done everything you could to make this company successful, and we're very, very grateful for you. And I just wanted to come by and let you know that I've talked with our CFO here, and we would like to present you with this check for $100,000, just as a bonus, just as a thank you for the hard work that you've done." So he hands you a check for $100,000. Taxes have already been taken out of it. Don't worry, we've already paid the taxes on that.
Nice.
So now you've got this, and off they go. Now you've got this $100,000 check, and you're filled with gratitude and you're filled with joy. And you start thinking about all the things you could do with $100,000 that just fell out of the sky. You could put your kids through college. You could take a world vacation. You could buy a jet ski, whatever your dreams were. Here's the means for them right there.
Yeah.
So you're holding this check for $100,000, and you walk over to the next booth, and you see a group of people gathered around, and you say to them, "Guys, you will not believe what happened. The president and the CEO just came over, and they gave me this check for $100,000. And everybody in the group looks at you, and they say, one person says, "Yeah, he came by to all of us, but we all got checks for $250,000. And then you feel that knife in the heart there, don't you? At that moment.
Yes.
Just right then you feel that knife in the heart, like instantly. You stop thinking about all the wonderful things you can do with $100,000, and you start thinking about what you could have done with $250,000. And that thought is immediately followed, and here's where you get to the real payoff. That thought is immediately followed by thoughts like this. Now you say, okay, so Jane over there is getting $250,000. She's late every day. I have to do half of her work for her. Every single report she puts in, I have to check for grammar and spelling. I do half of the work she gets. She gets $250,000. I get a measly $100,000. This guy over here, Jack, is a drunk. He's just kissing the butts of the people. He's getting $250,000, and I get this crummy, crappy, measly $100,000. And if you were to take that experiment and conduct it among enough people, and if the deal from the company was everybody has to accept the check, everybody, or else nobody gets the check. There are people out there, I'm telling you, there are people out there that would take a $100,000 check and tear it into pieces because the idea of somebody getting a bigger check for them is intolerable to them. Intolerable.
Yes. Man, that is a sad scenario, and it's sad, but it's true. And like you said, man, a lot of emotions are going to come out of it as it goes from gratitude. I mean, what is in your nature more, a grateful nature or a prideful nature? Because that's gonna step in. The wrath, the greed, the envy, all those things are going to fall into place. And gratitude is totally forgotten about. And, the Lord talks about these things when he's talking about, the work that he was going to do. I hired some people at the beginning of the day, right? And long story short, I hired some people, and it's like, these people are we negotiated the price. They were cool with it. Now some people are going to come later in the day, sun's going down. They're going to do some work, and they are going to get the same amount of pay. That doesn't seem fair, right? Now, for me, what I'm reading out of what the Lord is saying to us, like, look, man, rather than being all butthurt about the fact that this person got paid, the same thing that you did at the beginning of the day, because, he just asked you guys want a job? You want to do some work for the day? You know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to complain to the boss and say, we did this. I'm going to be back tomorrow. Right? Because obviously, man, you've got money to spend. You got work that needs to be done. I'm going to be gainfully employed. I will be back tomorrow. Thank you for giving me a job.
I did back at the end of October, I did a series for Daily Wire called America's Forgotten Heroes. And the three names instantly that I wanted to do, one of them was John Paul Jones, one of them was Jimmy Doolittle, and the third one was Booker T. Washington. And I read Up From Slavery, and I think Up From Slavery is one of the most important books ever written. And if the entire country would read Up From Slavery, we wouldn't have any problems anymore. And our racial problems would be the least of them. The thing that is most astonishing about the life of Booker T. Washington, who was born in a dirt floor cabin on a slave plantation with open windows and doors, basically in the middle of Virginia's freezing winters, was that every opportunity he had to improve himself, which other people turned down as being too menial for them, he not only accepted, he accepted with gratitude.
Yes.
And genuine gratitude in his heart. He got to Richmond and he had no place to sleep, so he slept underneath the sidewalk, underneath the floorboards. And he was very hungry, and he woke up the next day and he could hear and see the sounds of something banging, and he went over and found a ship that was unloading pig iron, which are basically bricks of iron. They're damn heavy, and they're horrible. And he went to the captain and asked if he could move the pig iron for the day in exchange for a meal. And the captain said, sure. And when it was done, he went up and thanked the captain and asked if he could come back the next day. And he did. And he started paying him and so on. And when Booker T. Washington started the Tuskegee Institute, he had a lot of students show up who were very bright, black students, former slaves or sons of former slaves. And they showed up and Washington said, well, yes, we're going to study, but then we're going to go out in the fields and we're going to plant some crops. And these guys said, well, we didn't come here to plant crops. We came here to be academics and intellectuals.
Wow.
And Washington said whenever he'd encounter that attitude, he'd just take his jacket off, grab an axe, and lead them all out in the field and start clearing some land. And what he was able to accomplish was through a sense of gratitude and genuine humility that moved mountains. And that gratitude is, I think, probably the single greatest virtue there is, because as they say in 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, all of them, they say you can't be grateful and unhappy at the same time.
That's right. Right. You can be free or you can be angry, man. You can't really be both.
What do you do? What do you do when you find what do you do to make yourself grateful when you find that you've fallen away from that? When you feel like you've been wronged, or somebody's gotten something that you deserved and didn't get, and maybe you genuinely did deserve it and didn't get it. What do you do to bring gratitude into your life?
I typically don't like to use a standard of somebody else's misery, to help cope with my life. But at the same time, I can't help but think about, hey, they did Jesus pretty dirty. Ain't nobody took any licks like he did. So it's like things like that, keep me from, just being totally belligerent about wrongs that may have been done, unless I'm behind the wheel. Sometimes I can get a little road ragey.
Yeah, me too.
And speaking of envy, Bill, that Camaro, man, I got, Lord help me. That car is flying.
We will see if we can make that happen. You know, the thing that, just to close this thought out and this episode out, the thing that I realized from that example about the checks and the insurance company is that the reason that you would feel so much anger and so much envy when you should be feeling gratitude, you're $100,000 richer, but all you can do is see other people getting $250,000. The conclusion I came to was the reason that you're filled with envy over that is because it's a gift. If it had been a reward, it would be different. If, for instance, somebody got a $250,000 check and you got a $100,000 check, but you knew that person was working weekends, right? Stayed till 10 o'clock at night. If it was a reward attached to the effort, you wouldn't feel the envy. But because it's a gift, you do feel the envy. And this is how you find people who are on public assistance who hear that somebody got a flat screen TV, but they got a 30 or 40 inch flat screen TV, and other people have a 70 inch flat screen TV. And how come I didn't get a 70 inch flat screen TV? Because it's a gift. And since it's a gift, since the state is giving this stuff out for free, unconnected to their effort, then people naturally enough say, how come this person got a bigger gift than I did? It must have something to do with me as a person or whatever. They start taking it personally, and then the envy hurricane begins.
Sure. And right there, Bill, that is a big, big lesson of what the Lord has done. His salvation, it's a gift. There's nothing we can do to earn it. There is no merits that we can actually come to actually do it. It's not exactly a reward. He does talk about your rewards in heaven, sure. But how do you get it? You don't necessarily work. You got to put your faith to work, but your work has to be based on a faith. And really the greatest work that you can do to show this faith is basically gratitude. Are you thankful? It's like, look, because you have a lot of people out there, they want Jesus to do these things like he's some magic genie, as if him dying for our immortal soul wasn't enough. Right? It's like, okay, Jesus, that was nice for you to get to.
Thanks for saving me from hell, but where's my money?
Right? Where's my car? Where's my prosperity and all that sort of stuff? And, they forgot what he's actually done in the long term. So, and Jesus, he's a worker. He works. It's like, look, man, I've got my mansion in the hills, man. But I've come down here. There's nothing that anybody can build that would satisfy what I'm actually worth, if I may. Foxes have dens, birds have nests and stuff like that, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. But I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do this work, right? Because you know what? I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that I had the mind to create you. I want fellowship with you. I love you guys, right? And I've got something really amazing to show you. And I'm willing to die to bring you there, to that place that you guys really think that you want, that place of peace, that place where the ground yields for you, where you don't have to work for nothing.
Oh, that's beautiful, Ben. And just to our viewers out there, let me just close by saying this. There is a lot of unhappiness out there. A lot of American patriots are watching things that they've loved being destroyed in front of their eyes. And furthermore, they feel an obligation, a sense of responsibility to protect these things. And as they continue to erode, we feel more and more misery and more unhappiness. And I would simply say to all of you out there who feel these same emotions that both Alfonso and I feel, that a dose of gratitude goes a long way. Whenever I feel just this misery of watching things disappear, it does a lot of good to say, despite all of the things that we're seeing and that we continue to see and that we will see, we still live in this amazing country with this amazing life and the ability to still speak our mind and do what we want to do, and the ability to continue to fight against these people that want to take these freedoms away from us. So if you find yourself filled with that kind of rage or despair, I think the best antidote to that is a little gratitude and a little look around your backyard or your family or your living room or whatever, and some gratitude for the things that you have, because it could be much, much, much worse. And I don't think a single person who lives in the United States is really in position to complain about much of anything compared to what life is like around the world and throughout the past in history. So just something to think about. It gets me through the day sometimes.
Yes.
That'll do it for this edition of the Virtue Signal with my friend and colleague, Alfonso Rachel, who we are very, very, very glad to have back with us. People have been asking for him since as long as this company's been here. And we were able to bring him back and get the show going as a result of the new members that joined us. We're very grateful for them. And very grateful, of course, for the members who've been with us from the beginning. So until next week, I'm Bill Whittle for Alfonso Rachel. Thanks for joining us here on the Virtue Signal.